Welcome to the unofficial review. I'm Seeds, and this is my football review. This one I'm going to be touching back on conversation of Wentz, and frankly, it's not one of those things where I don't think he has talent. I think he's got talent, but I do think that people are making him out to be this 10, and I don't think he's a 10. I think he's like 7 as far as talent. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say he's a 7. A lot of people are making silly comments, such as how I'd like to give him criticism. I'd like to tell where he needs to improve, but I'm not saying there's nothing really. I think there are established starting quarterbacks such as Tom Brady, such as Aaron Rodgers, such as I'm sure that Drew Brees and so forth. There's extremely well-veteran, they've been doing it for years type guys, and they still need to work on their game. They still need to stay focused and work on improving in certain fields. So to say a guy who's a rookie who's played 4 weeks or 4 weeks, to say he has no room for improvement, again, it's a moot point. And that's what it was. So it's 3 weeks. He's had a bye week already. But that's one of my things is when you're looking at these games again, like I was talking about before. He beat 2 crappy teams, and then the Steelers. The Steelers weren't a crappy team, but they sure as hell looked like it. That offense played very poorly. It kind of seemed like they assumed that they were going to get stuff done, and they kind of just couldn't believe what was going on. They kind of felt like they were going to let the ass whooping on Philly and wake Wentz up, when in fact the problem was they lost 2 of their best defensive players in that game earlier on. And so, again, Wentz looked a lot better than he really is. And I'm not saying he doesn't have talent, but what I am saying is that I think that talent is not going to carry it on, and especially with where he's playing, I'm concerned for the future. And so that's what I'm going to say is that that was one of the things was, and not to knock a guy for how he particularly gets it done, but that was one of the things I was noticing specifically in Wentz's games. It looks like the vast majority of his games are short dump-off plays to the left and right, where he's got dump-off plays and then he's got screen plays. But it didn't really look like he was playing the whole field, and so it does simplify the game for that quarterback when all you need to do is look here, and if the guy isn't available here, he's here. And it's just a straight shot. He's not feeding it through any small, tight windows. And again, too, there have been points where he has made a couple good plays. But again, the vast majority of the legwork is getting done by his receivers and his running backs. I mean, that was one of the things where Darren Sproles, he just dumped it off to him, and he went for 70-some yards or something. And so that's the thing, is that I'm not going to knock guy for how it gets it done. But when people are making this guy to be some Hall of Fame player before he's accomplished anything, I got to remind you of a few things. It wasn't that long ago that Philly and the experts thought that a guy named Nick Foles was going to get it done because he threw 20-some touchdowns and only a couple of picks over a period of games. And one of the things I was saying was, what were the circumstances with which that was performed? Because that tells you, again, a lot about if it's going to continue to happen or if it's going to dry up. And that was one of the things is that we saw with Nick Foles, it dried up. He was getting wide open guys. That was one of the things that some of the fellow football fans and I had kind of gotten caught off guard with the whole what Chip Kelly was doing, driving all the talent out of that place, because he got rid of was it Deshaun Jackson? He got rid of Deshaun McCoy, and those are the reasons why Nick Foles was looking so great. Because guess what? At the end of the day, no one was playing for him. No one was looking, how do we stop this Nick Foles guy? They were saying, how can we stop Deshaun Jackson? How can we stop Deshaun McCoy? And so there's one of those things where, again, because of the circumstances, Nick Foles looked a lot better than he really is. And this is one of the things that, while this is way too early to that we won't necessarily see this outcome yet, but I would not be shocked if by the end of the year or going into next year we saw it. But I would not be shocked by the end of this year we see this result, which is that because of the circumstances, because Wentz's head to me is getting blown up really big, and it's not all his fault. Like I said, a lot of these professionals aren't giving him any criticism. They're not saying what he needs to work on. And to me, if I was to tell him one thing he needs to work on, he needs to work on some humility. And I'm not saying that he's showboating and he's running his mouth a lot, but you can just, to me, I'm walking in his eyes and I'm watching his body language, and I think that he thinks he's a 10. I think he's reading into all this hype about him, and in the land of what I call it, Philly is the land of QB killers, because I just want to remind people, hey, they went from Donovan McNabb to Michael Vick, how did I get it, to Nick Foles, to Mark Sanchez, to Sam Bradford, to now Wentz. That was like 4 or 5 years, and they went through 4 or 5 quarterbacks. So that's the problem, is that Philly has this tendency of, they love you when they're doing great, but if you suck, you're going to know about it. I mean, I think that, frankly, I refer to, so That's one of the things that the Seattle team has. Their fans are known for the 12th man. Well, I call Phillies fans the 10th man because they take a guy off the field because they're so relentless on how hard they could be on their team. That's one of those things where most teams have a home field advantage. I don't think Philly has a home field advantage if they don't play well. They do if they play well, but if they're starting to suck it up and they're pushed up against a wall, it's literally going to be the team against the opponent's team and their own fan base. So that's something where, again, that's my biggest concern for Wentz, is I feel like once things start to slip, once this, like I said, it was, to me, in order for to have a good team, it's like a marriage. You got to take them in sickness and in health. I don't think Philly fans take their at least the Philly fans in the stadium. I'm going to give some grace to as a whole. But the Philly fans in the stadium don't give a lot of grace and give a lot of wiggle room for failure. It's once you've kind of fallen with them, they put a bad taste in your mouth, they'll start booing you, making you feel like shit. So you don't need to be thinking that way, especially at home when you're trying to be focused and focus on winning a game, and not drowning out the boos from your own fans. They're supposed to be helping you, not hindering you, which they can do. So my biggest concern is how I'm relating him. Is I'm actually seeing a possibility of him essentially being a mimic to RG3, and ironically enough, both of those guys were number 2 overall draft pick. Now that's a bit of a coincidence, but I would say that the relation to that and how that outcome could follow RG3 is that one, being that high up in the draft, the problem is that you have so much expectations for yourself, and people have so much expectations for you. So there's a certain level of you that you need to do it all, which, as we've seen, I mean, even some of the best quarterbacks have gotten drafted extremely late, and to me that created a humility where they're constantly hungry. They constantly, I mean, they might achieve all these achievements, they might get Super Bowl rings, they might get MVPs, but the thing that keeps them humble is they can look back and be like, I was neglected, I was overviewed, even I was underrated, even by the own team that took me. They passed on me time and again, and I got to prove my worth. Those guys who get first-round draft picks, especially the top 5, they think they've already made it, or they're worried because they're like, well, crap, they're expecting me to be this lights-out Peyton Manning in his prime type player, and I'm not that. So it just creates another distraction they don't need. And so one of the issues I'm seeing, again, that's similar to RG3, is they're succeeding. And there's nothing wrong with succeeding, but the problem with that is that, again, you lose your perspective. You lose that desire, especially when you're being told you're a 10. You might just get a little complacent, and you're not necessarily going to develop because you're being told, well, he doesn't, I'd like to figure out where he needs to work on, but he doesn't need anything to work. Yes, he does. And telling him he doesn't, it's not doing him a bit of good. It's one of those things where you can see guys who've been in the league for years. You look at Cam Newton right now, and he's been struggling. And there's more to it, I think, than his own struggling. But that's one of the things I've noticed with him is it seems like he's kind of out of his head right now. And that's one of the things I've noticed, even with some of those good teams, is that they need to be grounded. They need to be humbled. The talent's there, but they still need to remain focused. They still need to put in the work. And so that's the thing, is you're telling a guy named Wentz that he doesn't need any development. You don't really know, where he can improve, is doing him a disservice, because he's going to feel like he doesn't need to do anything. And the problem with that too is that you're inflating his accomplishments by beating 2 crappy teams and 1 team that played like shit. And so obviously it's not the same thing. And again, you can't knock a guy for his opposition screwing up. But again, you shouldn't give him praise because the other team choked. That isn't his accomplishment because the other team didn't get it done. He somehow did something. And so again, that brings me to a point too where with RG3, the biggest concern that I saw with him, that I'm seeing that could happen with Wentz, is that, so with him, his rookie year, I'm going to say he got Rookie of the Year. He led his team to the playoffs. And so they had all these expectations, and he essentially had met everybody's expectations, exceeded it, going so far, so to speak, his first year. And so the problem with that is that the following year, and then the years after years, and you can still see it, to this day, where he's still trying to achieve that peak of performance, he's still trying to achieve that accomplishment. And so because of that, he's taking hits when he shouldn't. And then again, we go back to some of the preseason games where Wentz was taking a licking for a 1-2 yard gain, rather than getting out of bounds and playing smart. He was, again, and that was the thing too, is I want to say it was his first or second preseason game. He threw a pick I want to say it was earlier in the drive, and it was in the red zone, so they would have gotten points. But there became a point where he felt the need that he had to get this stuff done in order for him to continue on this path of success, rather than him focusing on what he needed to do. And a lot of times, the right thing to do sometimes is nothing. Sometimes it's taking, an illegal grounding. Sometimes it's throwing out of the back of the end zone. an incompletion is a hell of a lot better than a pick or or taking an ass whooping that could compromise your entire career. So everyone, while he's doing well, is forgetting that. We're all forgetting that he got injured in the preseason because he stood in the pocket and took the hit, but he took the hit in a preseason game and it fractured some ribs. So my point is that as we've seen with his decision making, he's made a lot of poor decisions where he's compromised himself, and those injuries could have been so much more significant. So again, this early on in your career, and you're doing well, you're 3-0, and then again too this coming week, I don't think they're playing a very good opposition. So that, again, he might be 4-0, and again they're just going to talk him up more. My point is when you're high up on that pedestal, and again you're looking like a 10, and they're telling you're a 10, and you're really a 7. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you're not going to be able to accept that. You're going to want to attain that 10 again. So what are you going to give up to get that 10? And like I've said, that's what unfortunately happened to RG3 was he gave up his legs. He gave up his mobility, and what really made him a dynamic player because he didn't want to admit that he had to live to fight another day. And that's one of my biggest concerns I got still going in for Wentz, is I think that there's going to be a point where that lack of willingness to learn to fight for another day and to accept defeat, I don't think he's going to be able to handle that, especially again, like I'm saying, with the Philadelphia fans essentially being with you at the good times, but throwing to the wolves when you're in the bad. It's a looming concern that I just feel like, why do we think this guy's going to be the exception of the rule? If you look at all these other players, I mean, again too, like I said with Nick Foles, he got it done for many more weeks than frickin' Wentz has, and yet where's Nick Foles? He's a backup quarterback. I want to say in Kansas City. So again, you can accomplish all these things, and you can done things that have never been done before, and have quarterback ratings over a period of a certain time that have never been done before, but they don't necessarily mean anything. And the one key thing that I'm always saying is look at the circumstances with which it was performed, because that's going to tell you if it's going to continue or if it's going to fizzle out. That's going to tell you if it's a fluke or if it's the real freaking deal. The circumstances with which it's performed tells you a whole lot more than what actually happened. Numbers are only numbers. Why it happened, why those numbers occurred or didn't occur, is a huge, much bigger part of the pie. So we'll be, I'm sure, revisiting this conversation as it develops. But like I said, I'm still sticking with my feeling about Wentz, and it's not that he doesn't have the talent, but like I'm saying is I don't think he has the perspective, and I don't think anybody's helping him with that perspective. But I'm sure, like I said, we're going to be seeing here in the next few weeks. I'm thinking probably by like middle of the season, week 8, week 9, we'll have a little better of a picture. But it might wait until the end of the year when we're seeing playoff implications and such, when the games are worth more, that this internal desire that his lack of perspective that I'm concerned about. It might be a little wait towards the end. But like I said, wait for it. I have no reason to think that he's going to be any exception to the rule. But anyhow, so we'll be talking to you soon.